Okay, so the P. Diddy trial is now in day 3, Sean Combs. And it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just like, I want to stress again to the audience, we must distinguish before we get the legal instructions between disgusting, filthy, pervert, cad, asshole, and criminal. That's really what this trial is about. I think even the defense cedes point one. They have to. They have to. There won't be a juror in that room that can stand Sean Combs. But the question here is whether he broke the law, and even your humble correspondent is open-minded to being persuaded that there wasn't a technical legal violation. I really want to see I haven't looked up the proposed legal instructions, but we'll get them, jury instructions on what the law is. Because I'll tell you, like, I've got questions. I'm horrified by the testimony, but I've got questions about whether they're going to get a conviction. Okay, I hope they do, but that's just because I can't stand him. Okay, the star witness is Cassie. She was a singer, Cassie Ventura. She signed with him when she was 18 years old, or right around there. She became a singer. She signed like a 10-record deal with Bad Boy Records, which is his. And within like 2 years, he started having sex with her. And he was with a different woman at the time, but shockingly, he wasn't faithful, and started sleeping with Cassie. And then she testified how in the beginning, by the way, when she took the stand, she was 8.5 months pregnant yesterday. His side was so worried about that making her look overly sympathetic that they asked if she could be brought in and put on the stand without the jury in the room. Look at this. I mean, like, apparently they're not exaggerating. She had that enormous belly that we all get in the very, very last few days, which is where, like, it becomes like voyeuristic to even look at a woman at that point. It's just out of control. God bless you, Cassie. So anyway, the judge overruled that and said she can walk in, her full pregnant self, and she did. And she testified about how he started very early on telling her he wanted her to participate in these freak-offs. That's what he called them. And these things, I mean, it's the right word for them. I mean, they're absolutely depraved behavior where he would hire these male sex workers, and she's testifying, this is all, her testimony, that they would come over and that Sean Combs would be there watching and directing everything, and that there would be multiple sex sessions within the one freak-off, which could go for days. But even if it went for hours, there'd be multiple sessions in which she would have to perform with these male sex workers, including in like outfits and fishnets and masquerade masks and hooker heels is how it was described. And he would tell him exactly what sex acts he wanted and how, and then he would participate in some of them. We talked yesterday, forgive me, listening audience, about how he allegedly, both himself and through the male sex worker, urinated on her and I guess in her mouth, to where she testified she was gagging. She thought she was going to throw up. She testified that the freak-offs, quote, became a job where there was no space to do anything else but to recover and to just feel normal again, that they could go from 36 hours to as long as 4 days, that they took, quote, a big chunk of my life, sometimes on a nearly weekly basis. At the end of the sessions, the hotel linens were often very soiled with baby oil residue, as well as bodily fluids, including blood and urine. And his staff, keep in mind, he's being accused of like racketeering, like the way a mob boss does, where he has an enterprise of criminals around him. That's why these details are important, that his staff would both set up the freak-off rooms and clean up the freak-off rooms, that eventually they graduated to adding like television lighting, like Klieg lights in there, that would have red lighting coming out of them or blue lighting coming out of them to set just the right mood. Choking back tears, she testified, reading here from the New York Times. She testified the freak-offs made her feel disgusting and humiliated. If he wasn't in the room, he would sometimes watch over FaceTime. He began recording the freak-offs. Side note, the media has now filed a request to see the videotape of the freak-offs. And the parties are objecting, saying they don't need to see everything. I mean, like Cassie doesn't want them to see it, and Diddy doesn't want them out. And the judge says he's leaning towards releasing them because there's a little thing called the First Amendment. But of course, the media is like, we want to see the freak-offs. Show us the tape. That's what the media's position is. She lists the drugs that he provided to the participants: ecstasy, cocaine, marijuana, ketamine, mushrooms, whatever was the drug of choice at that point. She says she took the drugs for disassociating and to have some kind of buffer from what she was experiencing. She talked about how he beat her repeatedly. She talked about that one incident we saw at the Hotel Intercontinental where he dragged her and beat her on the ground. She was trying to escape a freak-off. Like it was just a day ending in Y. She was like, I mean, that's kind of, yeah, that we did that all the time. And he would beat me sometimes. And that time I made a run for it. And I stayed on the ground once he knocked me down because it was self-defense. I thought maybe he wouldn't be able to hit me as easily if I stayed down. I mean, he's just an absolute disgusting, hideous pig, awful man. She said she stayed to keep him happy. When you're in love with someone, you don't want to disappoint them. But as the years passed, even as she still sought to please him, she recognized he had become increasingly abusive, beating her and orchestrating ever more degrading sessions that made her feel like her career was no longer music, but performing in for his sexual satisfaction. Here's the thing. She testified, she was asked, the cross has begun, about why, like whether she told him that she didn't want to do it. And the testimony, as I understand it thus far, has been basically, no. She said she would do it. And they have text messages of her saying to him, like, I can't wait for the next freak off. I can't wait to do it. Like, I might not be able to do it today because I have a red carpet. And she testified about how she had to get all drugged up and also he would beat her. And it's like, she did have to go to the red carpet with a black eye. I think it was after that Intercontinental one we saw. But the defense has text messages from her being like, can't wait. I love it. You're like, when's the next one? And so this has the real danger for the prosecution of morphing into a Harvey Weinstein-esque case where it's only a crime if he forced you. If you guys are just freaks in bed who wanted to do this stuff, yes, there's a question of the prostitution element. But he's not being charged with abuse, with assault. And a lot of the viewers wrote in after our discussion yesterday saying, what do you mean? He beat her. It's on tape. Yes, I know. He's not being charged with that. That's not one of the charges. The charges relate to solicitation of prostitution or like arranging the transportation of a prostitute, and RICO, racketeering, a criminal enterprise. So it's relevant if there's a crime of prostitution and relevant if there was a crime on which the statute of limitations has run called assault. But they don't have to actually prove any of that. And he's not exactly being charged for that. But if this is consensual sex, or at least if Sean Combs believed that it was consensual sex, he could skate legally. And that's my impression so far. I very open-minded to this going another way. Your thoughts on the cultural impact of this trial and just thoughts on what we're learning now about one of the most famous people in America.
I mean, he should skate if that's the case, right? I mean, it's not criminal, and it's not part of a criminal enterprise if you're a scumbag. And sometimes it's very hard to separate those things in situations like this. I mean, I saw the tape from the hotel. Nothing about that surprises me considering what we know about his character. And as you said, Megan, it's like we can disassociate these things and say, you are a horrible, horrible monster. And that is clear. And his life is over. I mean, whether he goes to prison or not, there's no way he's going to be allowed back into the club of celebrity. It just can't. I mean, recalling that he had these white parties in the Hamptons, and, Martha Stewart is going to these things. This is not something that's just in the hip hop world. And that is gone for him forever. But whether or not he's been in jail, I don't know, for a year or something in Brooklyn, whether or not that is justified, I haven't paid really close attention to this because I have a life and I try to limit my Diddy, Puffy, whatever the hell he's called, consumption. But there is a thing that at the sort of heel end of that kind of Me Too movement where it was getting a little troubling, and I'm not saying that this is comparable, but there would be times when people
feeling salami.
But yeah, when it was feeling salami in the sense that, well, that was a bad relationship, or that person was a jerk, and it's like that's not a legal kind of thing. This is a next level of that, and it's gross. And my freak offs aren't like this at all. I mean, I have an iPad where
2 minutes gentle. At best.
Yeah, very gentle.
No,
there's no baby
fast.
oil. Yeah,
I'm like Woody Allen. I'm like, maybe a minute and a half, and it's done, and everyone's happy, and we read afterwards. It's like a book club. But we do. We're reading Willa Cather's My Antonia now. It's great. There is a moment when you look at this stuff and you say, the text messages. We saw that with Armie Hammer. We saw that with the pitcher from the Dodgers. So many of these things, the text messages always come out. and paint a different picture. And, we have to hold off on that. But if it is just having gross sex parties and maybe hiring a male prostitute or whatever, it's like the feds, this big raid, him in jail for it could be
Also,
that there's a lot more to this.
Not alleging any force. He testified that there was a male prostitute or whatever escort. I don't know how he goes by, saying she was the one who would text me saying, come over for the freak off. She was the one who would pay me. She and I developed like a friendship on the side. And he did say, I grew very concerned for her. I said, you've got to leave him. He beats you. He testified you heard a beating. But like the beatings are as horrific as they are, and they are criminal in their own right, though the statute of limitations may have run on assault. I haven't actually looked that up, but there's a reason he didn't get charged with those, and certainly the one at the Intercontinental. Oh, and by the way, the testimony by this one guy who was a security officer at the Hotel Intercontinental where that beating took place was that he saw it. He went up there, and this was a Friday. He went home for the weekend, and when he got back on Monday, the tape was gone. The tape was gone.
They paid somebody $100,000 for it.
Well, no, Diddy offered him $100,000 in a wad of bills saying, here, please make this go away. And I think the testimony was like, he was like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
This guy's LAPD. Right. No, but I think he was legit. But when he got back on Monday, the tape was gone. And he didn't call the police because she didn't want him to. She didn't want to testify. Like most domestic violence victims do not want the police called unless they're actively in fear for their life at that second. And then they almost always live to regret it and recant. It's terrible. It's a terrible dynamic. Gabby Petito, we saw a similar thing when she could have saved herself. In any event, I don't know, because all that testimony about how the escort willingly came, Cassie was the one who reached out to him. He seemed to enjoy it. He thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Like I don't know how we've gotten to like she's being forced by like the equivalent of a mob boss yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have read some accounts of this. I do have some interest in the story. We also talk about these things professionally, Moynihan, every once in a while. And look, the Cassie situation is
Camille's
awful.
joining the motion to see the freak offs. This is what we've basically.
How can I talk about
to get
this?
all the freak offs?
How can I talk about this if I don't watch? At least a little bit. I don't mind. Maybe pixelate it if you want to. Fine, but I'm going to watch.
With the lighting.
At least give me the sound,
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, Camille, then they come for your freak-offs. Yes.
But I do think, Diddy, clearly a violent person, dangerous. I think deviant are words that apply here. I agree. I mean, the federal RICO attempt, I'm still, to my knowledge, there isn't anyone else who's been charged. And the whole thing seems kind of unusual in that regard. One imagines that, as you said, Megan, the rest of those charges couldn't be brought in some of those other situations. But I mean, the things that were alleged in that civil suit that he settled with Cassie, that he had
for
blown
8 figures,
Kid
reportedly.
Cudi's, but that he'd blown up Kid Cudi's car. I mean, these are extraordinary allegations. This is a guy who sounds like he believes he is above the law.
This July, speaking of resets, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio. This bloc of emerging superpowers, including China, Russia, India, and Iran, are meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. They're calling this the Rio Reset. As BRICS nations push forward with their plans, some worry global demand for U.S. dollars will decrease, bringing down the value of dollars in your savings. While this transition will not happen overnight, the Rio Reset could mark a pivotal moment. So learn if diversifying your savings into gold is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free info kit on gold by texting MK to the number 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation info kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.